Alright, welcome back. I'll be honest, I was probably going to do a video yesterday, but I ended up being called into work, so I'll be doing it today instead. So I'm going to continue on with what I had started with the Iron Eater, where I kind of just focus on one of the other forms of ATP production. This time we're going to be doing, thermo, so we're going to have that off, obviously. I'm going to just keep the firewall off because it's fun to see what's going on elsewhere. Alright, so we're going to just continue. Obviously this will generally be, for the most part, similar to, obviously the start of the game will always be very similar once you know what you're doing a lot of times. Let's just speed it up just so we can get to the editor quicker. But yeah, so like I did with the iron one, I'm going to be using obviously glucose and sulfur at the same time. We're not going to be utilizing iron at all, since that's part of this whole kind of challenge. Just glucose and one other source of energy. And there are definitely, I think, other spots that like the thermoplasm thermosynthase can be utilized in, but I believe the hydrothermal vents are just the best place for it, since there tends to be a lot more heat generated, therefore to actually get energy. Alright, take a look at the patch map, so we, stuff here. I don't actually remember if I mentioned this with the iron one, but the caves do have more iron compared to the hydrothermal. So down here it's about 3.3. So let's actually look at maybe. Is there another? There is no other. Okay, this is the only hydrothermal vent then. That's interesting, but I was hoping to check another one, but I don't know if this already gone down a bit from what it would start at. But yeah, but compared to the cave, caves are about twice the amount. Obviously less hydrogen sulfur, hydrogen sulfide, yeah. Yeah, it's like the cave fight would actually be better if you want to be an iron eater or use it as a source of energy. Obviously we're going to be focusing on temperature, which once again, obviously 98 degrees Celsius. Like most of the patches tend to be a lot lower, as you can kind of see. The 23 degrees isn't that bad, but I think the other really warm one, 23 there. So it looks like caves and type hills might be tied for temperature, being at around 23 degrees Celsius, honestly, when there's no glaciation happening. Although at the moment, I mean these are just stationary stuff. I don't know if there's potentially going to be something that changes with how like temperature and even like light levels might be affected once we start working more on like planet generation in the game, because like these ones, if they're located more near the North Pole, they might be cooler than like the patches that are located like here, which would be maybe the equator or however they plan on doing it. I haven't really checked out what they're doing in that regard, so I could be mistaken on the plan there. Yeah, we're gonna grab synthesizing and that and membrane. We did like an orangish red, I think, before. Temperature. Yeah, we'll just go with a red. Of course, we're gonna name it. Once I came into this, like the EDA thing, because I actually took a class I wasn't prepared for when I was in college for plants, and so many plants have that in their name. I'm just very used to using it when I'm doing like a scientific name. Alright. And of course, we do want to keep an eye on this along with this. I generally don't have this view up because it can get confusing when trying to differentiate if you're doing iron and other stuff, because the compound, and also in general, the compound clouds do are like kind of prioritized over the temperature look. As you can see, like I can't tell if there's all blue spots in here unless the compound cloud were to be like fully consumed or like moves out of the area with a current. So yeah, I probably could also go and consume some things just in case we need that later on. So it would be beneficial to our species. A little bit of damage because it's my ATP there. Kind of want to use this generation to just consume a number of cells before I have to switch over, since it'll be a lot easier at this point to do that. Since we have a lot of smaller cells at the moment mainly, I think I'm going to actually just continue on. And of course we already have a cell that's become tiny. Oh, that one's gone extinct, which is interesting. Also, I do find the food chain to be interesting at times. It does seem to do some odd things on occasion from what I've noticed. Like I've seen smaller cells sometimes being stated as eating bigger cells. So I don't know if there's some issue still with it, but it is what it is. I think everything is just in this patch right now. Nothing. Oh no, we got things in here. Let's actually make sure I'm on the right one. Okay, so I think that was just a patch extinction, but it still exists. But it has gone into a place that's not as good for it, so who knows how it's gonna handle that. Now it's always gonna tell me about the iron synthesis. But that is not what we're doing. I should have increased the oxygen resistance there before last generation, but I didn't think of it. Move that up actually, there, put that there. I may as well grab another one of those. We're still going to want to be able to produce enough to keep us going decently with glucose and whatnot. But we have it pretty good at the moment there. I'm going to try to keep the main source being the temperature, but it does make it difficult when you're in areas that don't have a lot of heat, actually. It is one of the sort of downsides of it, which before they made that change, I'll admit that thermosynthase, after they had affected, can I eat this thing? I don't know. Nope, I cannot. But after the chloroplasts had their sort of nerf, so with the actual day-night cycle addition, the thermosynthesis and the similar things, they were so good because you didn't have that debuff at that time. So when they did eventually add it in, it made it a lot better, just for balancing reasons. We are a fat cell right now. We might be able to eat some of these bigger things, potentially. You can kind of see the problem with having most of the energy coming from heat, since you can see the bar keeps on dropping quite a bit. And that is the result of how the temperature kind of works. Alright. There. Kind of sort of decent now. Can't do that. Need a bit more for that. I think we're good at the moment. if you pay, and I don't know how many people who actually watch these also play the game itself. I would assume a decent amount of people, or at least, it would be interesting if I've actually introduced some people to the game with these, if you've stumbled across it randomly. But I did make a update on the world building that I've been doing. I have reached the third continent, actually. Well, third supercontinent, I should say. Be a bit more precise about it. So that is a thing that's happened. One of the things that, I'll be honest, has been driving me sort of a little crazy is that a lot of my supercontinents end up having like an interior ocean in them. I think in part because of just how they come together with the different sections of the continents, generally being like an outer curved section instead of like an interior, like a flatter interior section. But my most recent one doesn't have that issue, so it's kind of nice actually. So I'm pretty happy in that regard. We've got another single hex guy showing up. So I've not been paying attention if there's been other things going on. Timeline, let's see. Oh, there's already a full extinction. Alright. Let's see if how high up have things gotten so far. I have something up here that is an iron ear, but there's very little iron for it. I'm going to assume that's the highest anything's gone. Yeah, looks like it. Well, possibly, okay, here, maybe because of that connection. I'm assuming nothing else height-wise. But we might start getting some photosynthesis shown up in some of these guys soon. It is something for us to keep an eye out for. Alright. I'm not going to really mess with these unless we have to in this one. Trying to get about 20 plus on here compared to this for the nucleus, because that seems to be about how much you need for that to actually not kill you. And we don't have enough for the tolerance at all there, so no point in messing with that at all. I don't know why, but making your thing cell always seems to just increase that. Leave everything else sort of as is, and off we go. And we'll say that it's one thing we have not done yet, and I don't know, I may as well do it in a moment here. Let's take a look at the evolutionary tree. We've actually got a few things to extinct. Obviously the single guy there. Let's see, obviously, first the main branch. This one just had a membrane change, just had nothing else has come off of it. Just, if this thing dies off, that whole branch is just gone. This was the thermal one. So it actually went back to being just a single hex. But this one has had a decent amount of changes to it. There's also that, those were pretty sort of similar in their design, just different colors. Yes, there's that. And this one didn't do well. Even here's us, of course. Gotten some other branches from us. That one has a spike. That's a new one. I don't think I've seen that yet. That one also has a spike. I mean, other ones are becoming spiky. Alright, I'm gonna get over here for that hydrogen sulfide. Hey, that's mine. It's my hydrogen sulfide. Of course, we also have to hope for some eruptions at some point, because if we don't get enough, the hydrogen sulfide is going to drop a lot and it's going to become a lot harder to utilize it. So we have to hope for some eruptions at some point. Just use that to hopefully get a better spot before I enter the editor. May as well just nab some of this ammonia as well, I guess. Alright, should be pretty good. Okay, well, we just had an eruption, so that is good. You can actually see right there. Pretty low, actually, so that's a nice jump we had. I think the result's just glucose going down. You know, a few times I've done these playthroughs and I've had, like, other hydrothermal vents, and then those ones are the only ones getting eruptions in them, is somehow one of the most obnoxious things I've had happen in this game. Just because you want to use it, but to make that trip would be so difficult for like the species I've made. It just isn't worth it at that point in time. Let's see, I don't think it's thermoplasm. Alright, well, we already have enough. We just have to wait for a number of generations for the thermoplast to actually be available. We could probably pull off the nucleus next generation. We might also want to get a bit more excess ATP production first before we do it. We might also want to make it so we can generate even more glucose with the hydrogen sulfide. So we might actually end up doing that. And we can knock this up a little bit in preparation for photosynthesis to start making oxygen come down here. It shouldn't be like a ton of oxygen, so it shouldn't be like super dangerous to us, I think. I just ate something when I ate something else. Alright, me. Yeah, I think I've probably mentioned it before, but one of my suggestions also with Thrive is, especially with the, like this microbe stages, as you play, don't try to sit in a single spot the entire time unless you are like a sessile organism, like if you're playing a plant, I mean, kind of happy to do that somewhat if you want to conserve energy. I mean, you could also move around as a plant, but in general, in order to keep on getting new areas of compound clouds, you want to move around a bit, because after a while, like an area you're going to be in is going to get depleted with all the other cells moving around and doing stuff, especially as, like, you know, other things occur at the same time. You're going to want to keep moving to keep things going. There's been a meteor impact now. I wonder what kind it is. It looks like it's an iron one. So that one, that now has iron in it. Only enough, it has more iron than the cave. But of course, that's a randomized event, so can't rely on that a ton. Also, that's okay. That's interesting. Looks like the iron impacts might also slightly decrease the light levels in the patches they hit. I never actually noticed that before. I do know it should increase the carbon dioxide somewhat. Looks like it did like a little bit there. No, looks like it might have gone down. So, I mean, that is interesting. Okay, we got some photosynthetic things showing up. I don't know what they're doing there. But yeah, so obviously we should expect to start seeing oxygen eventually. It is starting to get down there. Probably get down very soon, and eventually to us, we're going to have problems if we don't start increasing our oxygen resistance. Do that, and then get that up by a single tick at least. Alright. I think next generation we're going to go for the nucleus. Yeah, one thing I have always found sort of interesting is, and also, at least with Thrive, any game you do, you could, because you can, if you know the, so like your patch seed, sort of your world seed or whatever, you can actually put that in when you make a world, and you can create a world that you've already done before, which I might end up doing with that, the one that I found the banana biome in, because I'm probably going to want to keep that as like a, maybe like a mini series within all this as we get more updates, and each time we can look at the differences in how like species evolved, what showed up, and all that. Because that would be kind of a fun thing to look at, how each game produces different things, because well, that's kind of how it works. And I think it's an interesting concept at the same time to think about, if things were a little different on Earth, how just different life could be, and how different the planet would even look to us in a slightly, in like a parallel reality where things just were a little bit different. Could give me more stuff, so that's actually really good. That's the only thing that really happened. Yeah. Alright. Of course, as usual with the nucleus, you're always going to see some negative effect after putting it on with your overall species, just because it is a lot harder to handle. Yeah. I'm going to just move this up a bit as well. There we go. Yeah, when it becomes slower, we might suffer a little bit. We'll have to see. Yeah, at least as long as you have enough ATP to keep moving without taking damage, that is kind of decent. It's kind of the main way I think I'm trying to play these at points, these sort of specific like energy things that I'm doing here. Of course, you have to be careful at the same time of other stuff becoming a problem. Alright, okay, we're just jumping in real quick because don't want to stick around too long and then die. So that would affect our species negatively. Another iron meteor. And starting to get some oxygen present in here. Obviously, good thing to have the resistance already increased somewhat. No, we probably shouldn't be considering dealing with the metabolisms at all. We're probably not going to have enough oxygen present to really make mitochondria useful. That's probably really only good in the upper patches, I've realized. Everyone who's seen me do it in some other ones probably just ignored the playthroughs where I do that. So I wasn't really paying attention that much to how it handled. Funny enough. Let's see. I know some of these are in our patch, I think. Let's check that. I think that might have been something that wasn't. Okay, yeah. Do chemoplast or thermoplast? I'm probably gonna go with that because also two. Sometimes I make my choice based on which one is the easier one to actually get, the quicker one. And obviously, if like it would advantage in like 3 patches, the other one wouldn't be as beneficial at that point. So we're still on these. We do have the chemoplast already, so we can just slap. Yeah, okay. We need to make sure we get that higher. Let's put more into thermo there for a moment. Hopefully once we get the thermoplast, it says right before, so maybe 1 or 2 more generations, we should start being able to switch those around to a better one. Alright, off we go again. We need to keep an eye on the one. Is this it? No, it's not. Some damage from something. Okay, that is what we're looking for. Yeah, but I am low on hydrogen sulfide, and I'm dropping in blue, so I may as well nab this while I still can. just have to get it to last for... We also have to grab a next game cycle, and hopefully we should be good. We'll have a free thermoplast as well the next time we're in the editor. Well, here's one of our things. Is it? I mean, you should expect that to happen, even with the nucleus. It is always a good idea to try and make sure you can survive at least, for the most part, before you just throw the nucleus into your creature. You want to be able to actually survive with it, but you should still expect some hardship while you have it, until you can sort of get a good amount of HP production to offset it. And also see at times a fluctuation of the temperature gauge, especially when you're in these sort of cooler sections. And I was saying before how things were really different early on with the thermoplast before they changed that, because they didn't have that sort of temperature differentiation. So you just enter into you just kind of go through and you just have a consistent source of energy, because there's nothing really affecting it at all. Okay, we got the thermoplast now. Delete that one there. 25 left over. Can't really do anything. We're gonna just increase the option because we know we are once again having the option slowly rise. I tend to max that out eventually, just personally, even though I don't know actually how much you would need depending on how much option you get at these lower patches. I still do it as a sort of a caution. I think it's just better to be safe with it. Okay, now we have to once again find one of the cells that we need to do symbiosis with. Okay, that thing I just consumed had a something that came from a surface patch, I'm pretty sure, or had a really weird genetic mutation. Potentially because a bunch of it's at a surface patch. That was iron. I don't know why I tried to do that. You are the ones I need to consume. I may become stronger. Get over here. I said get over here. I mean, honestly, it's one of the reasons I do think Celia is really beneficial when she can get them and just drag things in towards you. I'm losing glucose because I need to get this hydrogen sulfide before I die. Come on. I can't even consume that big chunk. That'd be really nice if I could. I'm gonna just enter this. We're just gonna kind of see, yeah, so we have suffered over time. We're starting to level it out, and hopefully soon we're gonna start increasing somewhat. Also, and I will say, when you're doing something that you can try to turn into, well, if you're doing endosymbiosis, always try to make sure you know what species it is and check to make sure it's still in the patch, because if it goes away, you kind of just lose out on it, and you don't want to just sit on it when it's not even there. Anyway, I'm going to grab a cilia and modify it to that, at least for now. 35 left over. Nothing I can really do there. Let's take it to increase this some more. Alright. This should hopefully make it a bit easier now to get the thing we're trying to enter symbiosis. suffering greatly. Because you can see I have nothing over here. I need to somehow find a good patch. That is actually also beneficial there. And since this is one of the reasons why I suggest always trying to move, because eventually you find yourself in these kind of situations. If there's hydrogen sulfide there, I need to get to that. Need to at least consume a bit of it. There's that big chunk there, though. Oh, I can consume a big boy, apparently. Good to know. Another big boy consumed. Alright. This is actually pretty good. Hopefully we drop a little bit more, but I think that'll be okay. Any other new things I have kind of missed? Actually, global if I want to see everything. It's so much more information. When we're actually, because I was on the dev team before we even had the actual evolutionary tree in the game. I was trying to utilize all this information to like write one that someone could kind of look at to utilize, because I wasn't sure if games could be transferred over, like save data could be. And I kept on, I would just randomly have species mentioned that I didn't see like evolving previously, and I fairly soon I was using the global like timeline thing, so I should have seen everything. So it was really weird just how often I would see stuff that showed up that wasn't mentioned. But I did the best I could, but I mean, I don't think they ended up really utilizing that for it. Did I just... I thought that said sapiens. Yeah, that was kind of a really wonky thing I had noticed at that time. Alright, so looks like I haven't missed anything else. But, let's see, we got that there. Have, I don't know why, like, 3 of those things actually want sunlight there, but whatever. Like, something developed a toxin in one, and now everything in like some of these other patches have toxins. And of course, got this. Good thing to have gotten. Let's see if there's something else we might want to do. Hey, is this what I would say we're consume? Viconus and then a Viconus Prilaris. Is that in here? Viconus Prilaris. Is there, and then I think Premium Viria was the other one, right? Yes. If I do that for Demos, I'm gonna, let's look at their population sizes actually real quick. Viria is a lot higher than this. So let's, it does potentially mean I risk losing this. It's a potential endosymbiosis target. But I have noticed over time that some of these like what basically would be eukaryotic cells seem to eventually kind of go extinct in patches once you have, you know, eukaryotic cells present. So I'm going to actually do that first. And those demoplasts for that. Modify that. No, I'm going to keep it that. That'll be helpful still. I should do that. 30 there. And then top that up again. Alright. I have a new endosymbiosis target I have to keep track of. Hopefully it won't be too difficult. And I think that's it right down there. Come to me. The only one will stay, the other one won't. That thing I think already has mitochondria in it. Still not entirely sure why AutoEvo can just bypass all the like requirements to obtain things like the player does, but it's Auto Evo, I mean, it helps make it a bit more of a challenge for the player, I'd say. Maybe the other one we were trying to... Oh, I can already eat that thing. Oh, well, to be fair, I'm almost gonna... Eat you as well. This will be funny. Come on. Come on. There we go. It's sort of funny. Get more hydrogen sulfide. I should actually check the current amount in the patch. We haven't had a volcanic... Speaking of volcanic eruptions, an glacier event is about to start. Alright. It's just the eruption. We haven't seen a lot of unique meteorite events at all. We're showing that, yep, 50% there. So I'll just double check to make sure it's still here. Yes, it is. Now, and as you can see, it is decreasing, so it's a good thing we are trying that first, because the other one is increasing. So it's a good move to do that. I can't even do that. What else do I want to do that I can? It's telling me there was this iron. It wants me to utilize iron. Yeah, I know, game. I know. But this is what I'm doing. Doing something different. Actually, really don't know what else I want to do at the moment. I mean, so I can just do that, I guess. Alright. Actually, I deleted one, so we'll just change that. So actually, that's funny enough. I could probably actually just put a vacuole in here now. Put you right there. Let's modify you. Probably gonna need to hold glucose for now. You've probably seen a lot of times I do that with glucose and like the hydrogen sulfide. It helps keep those up a bit higher. You can survive a bit longer. So let's get the glucose that's given to us from the editor. These guys without any problem. Looks like, and that's the other thing with the iron, it is very good as a source of energy because of just how widespread it is, especially as other things kind of go away. And you don't need a lot of it either to fill up your like storage bar of it. That's which I find just be a very useful one like other option to utilize. So like in general, I guess I would say if you're playing this game and you don't want to rely on just oh my god, flung. If you don't want to rely on just like glucose and whatnot, definitely pick up iron synthesis because it is surprisingly efficient. thing is iced over at the top. Fun times. Okay, that was actually a really good thing we had done that, because now look, that species that we were using is gone completely. If I hadn't done that, I would have missed out on that opportunity. However, I think this one is also low as well, I think. Yeah, I am going to still try this one, but there's no guarantee it'll end up actually working out for us, simply given how things are going. I think for the first time I'm going to do that. It just takes our energy at the moment. And I'm going to probably start placing these soon. But there's nothing, sadly, there's nothing we can really replace the hydrogenase with. Because the metabolome would do that, but you'd have to get to a certain amount of oxygen in the patch for it to become an efficient option. And of course, there's no organelle variant for the hydrogenase, so it's just kind of stuck with these if you don't have anything higher, if you're not in a higher up patch. I think I just left a bunch of unused mutation points. I could have put in the oxygen resistance, but whatever. Let me just turn this back on. Yeah, it's really annoying, especially with all the iron that's present at times in this. Also, I should try and find the thing that I need to consume again. That, okay. To just sit down. Let's chill out here. See. Cannot take you in yet. Let me try this. I'm gonna go back and try to reclaim my hydrogen sulfide chunk that I sent flying out of me. There we go. That is an entirely different thing. Got it. You know what? I think my strategy is going to be to exit from the editor cycle right here, so I can hopefully drag one of those guys in the moment I enter. Looks like they have actually increased in population though. As you can see down here, there's like no small cells anymore. Although to be fair, what I'm doing with this is not really realistic. You wouldn't be interested by seeing other eukaryotic cells. So it is funny it is a theme doing the game. Alright, put that on, and let's just increase this. Regardless. Actually, look at this. We have about 1.5 traits. I think next round we would be able to get this, but I don't think it'll even be efficient enough to really replace the hydrogenases at all. Sad as that may be. Now see, a lot of our energy does come from the thermoplasts. Of course, with enough time, we would also be able to do that again. Get you now work my way back to you. No, I'm too small for right now. Come on. I need you. I need you. I guess I'll just push it until I can actually... Okay, there we go. I can actually get it now. course, we'll keep the glucose topped up for us. Another good way to sort of ensure that is to try and consume a bit more glucose so we actually are generating the hydrogen sulfide itself and actually storing it instead of just not. Also be beneficial. And as you can see right now, I'm sort of sticking to this red area that I have because that's from the heat map. I'm just trying to stay there so I can keep the ATP up to a decent amount. Okay, so once again, I haven't looked at it in a while. This. So where was that one? Okay, so they actually did have things eventually come off of it. Okay, this group ended up kind of suffering a lot, but that is how life goes. So it's interesting to know how long they survive sometimes when they're like this, because a lot of times they die out very fast. I do love just seeing the things out of re-evolve into that and then died out. It is just fun to see all the things the game will come up with. Of course, there's the occasional things that it shouldn't be able to do, which I think was one of the things I can't remember if it was in one of these or if it was in a test I had done where one of the cells that had a nucleus actually developed a sort of like the muscle, right? Which maybe it's probably in like my very first video I did showing just the overall kind of state of Thrive at the time I made that video. But yeah, I think it was something that's been fixed for the next update. But on occasion, the kind of like the eukaryotic cells will be able to get the muscle fiber. It's supposed to be only available, I believe, in the colony, so like in the next stage of the cell colony builder stage of sorts, as I like to think of it. Kind of tell like this group became the photosynthesizer of the planet somewhat. I'm sure there's other branches as well that have done it. But yeah. The other thing is nothing else has formed a nucleus yet. Besides the group we made. And I think I've said it before, it's always interesting to see how the game handles that sometimes. So on occasion, it'll even beat you to it. Sometimes on like completely random species. Although something I think could be cool to do for one of these is instead of doing survival, just kind of showcasing some of the other, like the, I guess like the benchmark and just kind of more simulation version, because there is sort of a way you can just generate a planet and just without the player being involved in it and see what happens with it, which is a pretty cool thing in my opinion. Oh, there's a lot going on in that one. Yeah, I mean, I have messed with that option actually before a little bit. See sort of like just what can happen in it. Maybe one of these videos I should end up showing the panspermia start, because that is really different, obviously. And I'll kind of just say how that one worked. I may as well just mention all of them. So obviously the one we always use is a hydrothermal vent. Start at the very bottom of the ocean. With an area that has a lot of hydrogen sulfide. One of the hotter patches in the game. Very good, pretty decent start as well, I will say. When you're playing the game. Then there's the tide pool start, which is once again another decent way to start. And there you can actually, you could immediately start doing photosynthesis, I think, by the first editor cycle, because obviously you have the intense light, so you can just start with the thylakoids pretty quickly. right off the bat, but you can also cause a pretty quick glaciation event ever since we added that in as well. So there is that to consider with those starts. And the other one, just everything is kind of already filled out, but the problem is you still start out as a single hex, so you can be at a very big disadvantage sometimes in that one. Yes, so those are kind of the different start options you have with Thrive. May end up showing some of those eventually in some games. I have this, but kind of see at the moment it's 0.002 glucose for 0.801 HP compared to 0.013 for 5, so it's not that good. In part because the oxygen level, as the oxygen does increase, this will become better, but I don't, because of our patch, I don't think it's going to become better than the hydrogenase at the moment. But I guess we'll get that as high as we can eventually. There's a lot of our generation now with the HV, so well, a lot of our HV is coming from the thermoplast, so temperature is like our main thing. This is our back. We might want to try and increase this actually more, just in case we get into rough spots with this. But it really is kind of just a backup option almost at this point. We're really just running on temperature. As you can see, because we're affected a lot more by sort of the temperature differentiation, and you'll see the ATP bar drop a lot more often, and will become very slow as well. No, I cannot. But yeah, I've always just kind of done this more normal start whenever I do these, just so we always have a similar start that more than likely most people will do when they do play Thrive. Plus, also for like a new player, you'd probably want to start with this, because obviously if you rush too quickly for photosynthesis, you could end up could be more negative for you in the long run once the glaciation event happens, like within the first 10 cycles of the game. And obviously this one is just, I think this is also maybe the first, the hydrothermal event I think was maybe the first way to start the game they ever added in. They might have added the other ones in later on. I don't actually know much about that specifically. It looks like we actually had a bunch of other, some smaller things show up in here. Come visit. Like, these upper patches is usually the best place for the mitochondria and whatnot, because like 46% oxygen is crazy. Mitochondria would be so good at that point. Hold on, actually, what? Right, 1,600 million years. You know what? I don't do this very often with these, because you do end up going into another like version of the game. Obviously the next stage, but we'll have a little bit of fun. I think I've only really gone over it like the one time, I want to say. So it doesn't hurt to show off a bit more of that, perhaps. Some of our other ones. I do utilize the, and you may have seen me do this before, I do utilize the signaling agent quite a bit sometimes, especially if you're a sessile sort of creature, you may actually want to utilize it a bit more than you may normally want to, because it can make it easier to actually get your own cells away from you. And so it's like, obviously they wanted to drag them close to me, so I just said, hey, come to me so I can attach to you all instead of having to hunt them down and normally. Yada yada yada. First, obviously this is still, alright, so you immediately just kind of vanish. Also, this will generally end up showing like the last thing you look at. Sometimes, same thing with when you actually look at it elsewhere. does sometimes just say your species goes extinct from the planet, I think. I want to see if it does at all. Well, actually, oh, there is actually a icon for that. I did not realize that. This does also immediately give you like all the different things you haven't unlocked it, which is, I assume this would change. Which may as well point this out. I'm still not as efficient as a hydrogenase is, sadly, even though it is the mitochondria. Yeah, so we don't really have any extra things, obviously. So really, at the moment, there's no additional stuff here. You're just making a bigger colony, really. I assume we're going to have things added in here, some new parts and features. Obviously, also, you do have, these just become cheaper as the goal is now, well, just, adding a bunch of cells together. I usually do kind of this early on. I also do like making a bunch of different types of cells. It'll be like my movement cell, my kind of head, stomach sometimes, eyes. Sometimes I just kind of fill with other things. I like to do that just so I can start almost forming like a slightly basic creature, even though I think like in real life at this stage you're generally not having species do that yet. Like this would be like the Volvox, so they're still really like one cell type just in different kind of clusters. Whereas now this is where I do the flee. They'll just, so with that one, they'll actually move away from you, which is really nice when you're crowded by them. Plus you can make the other members of your species run away, but just by kind of following them so they get away from you. Of course, yourself should be somewhat careful of other cells while you are just by yourself. Because I don't think the colonies share a storage capacity at all. So I don't think that's a thing that you can utilize. And again, obviously, could change as we actually start developing the stage a bit more. One of the nice things is if you wanted to make something that can just consume a lot of things without really having to move direction-wise, you can just kind of spread your kind of colony outwards in a straight line, sort of, and it will just catch everything, because there tends to be kind of a big, especially when you get to these bigger cells, they sort of have a much bigger range of what they can kind of grab. And like just the area around them, that is basically pretty much just what I'm sort of trying to mention there. A bigger range for having food, like the various kind of chunks and whatnot. That is the other thing. You don't really expand now, so you can't take advantage of like your cells size expanding, because you just kind of butt off into new cells without it really growing. Now, so that probably might change. So I really don't see why it wouldn't do that. Now I'm going to receive radiation damage. Hopefully I'll survive. Do have no glucose. So some ingested matter that's helping me. It was from one of the rocks I managed to consume earlier. Of course, thermosynthase is my best option at the moment. I'm pretty sure my thermosynthase is high. Like I have enough of it that I don't need to worry about even glucose. I could probably actually potentially just get rid of glucose entirely at this point. although it could cause a problem early on, but you know what, I might actually try to do that with the cell. Let's see if we can pull that off. That would be really kind of cool. Obviously, I probably would generally not advise doing that early on in the game because it can be really rough if you run out of glucose and you don't have enough to handle, especially because how the thermosynthase works and all that. It can be really rough when you don't have a lot of heat, but because in part the cells in the colony do share the resources somewhat, and they're kind of spread out. It's not as hard because you're bound to generally kind of something. It'll help you generate some heat for it. But yeah. Now see, there's definitely changes here. Let me try this as like a test on one variation of creature. Actually change the color. That'll make it actually stand out a bit more. We'll just do that. Make it blue so it's easier to see. Is this the stem cell? Oh, I'm changing the stem cell. Hold on, let me undo all that. Because I wanted duplicate it. Honestly, just like that. You probably actually did. On my previous videos, I actually did go into this, test out all the different types of toxins from different cells, and I labeled them all. If you remember that. So that was something I did. So this isn't the first time you've seen me go into this like later stage of the game. So we're not going to put it down yet. It is also just kind of fascinating at times to just test it out, see how it works. And I think also just fun because, well, this is going to be part of Thrive's very near future, at least with this stage. This is what we're headed towards soon. Going to be entering multicellular stage, and eventually where my project will finally start to actually have some influence on what you see in game will be obviously the 3D stages. So that would be obviously the true macroscopic, when you're truly actually starting to create a large-scale animal instead of just a colony of cells and all that. Because that is the goal there, and I'm sure we're going to see people make a lot of cool things when we finally get to those stages and things become functional instead of what they are at the moment. We're just kind of doing random stuff. And since I'm probably going to wrap up probably now, let's just take a look at scanning the evolutionary tree. Of course, this does, I mentioned before, this does break once you enter it, so not going to see changes. This should eventually get fixed for when we get to the actual stage itself. Maybe even in the next update. I think I saw something that might be getting a fix already. But yeah, I'm kind of curious to know if anything else managed to get a nucleus in the meantime. That is a lot of slime jets. Oh my lord, I don't understand why it does that sometimes. So it looks like people did it, but they were in different groupings. So the first one branched off here, and then just slapped 4 on, and then decided it needed let's see, 6 more, I guess. It's like I need 10 of them, and then none of them are even modified, so it just wants a bunch of speed. Then again, that could also indicate something about some of those other patches about what's beneficial in those areas. Because after all, if it wasn't helpful and it also couldn't handle it, wouldn't be doing it. this, I feel like, anywhere else. And even, I think actually my next video, I'm probably going to do it right after this, and as soon as I don't like stagger uploads, I'll just put them out when I do them. I think the next one might actually be showing the kind of more simulation thing you can do with Thrive, and we could see how long it might take some of them to actually have nucleuses show up in some of the species around the planet, at least in general. That looks about it. Alright, let's save the game first. Alright, thanks for watching and have a good day.